On Father's Day, Sophie walked into my living room, carrying a small gift bag as if she were delivering something precious. She handed it to me with a smile, quick, tight, and empty, the kind you give when you're posing for a photo you'd rather not take. Inside, a pair of navy socks. $15. The price tag was still dangling like she hadn't even bothered to take it off. My heart sank, but I forced a polite nod. That afternoon, I made the mistake of opening my phone. As I scrolled, one photo froze my hand mid-swipe. There was James Mitchell, Sophie's father-in-law, posing in some upscale downtown restaurant, grinning like he'd just won the lottery. And on his wrist, a Rolex Daytona, $10,000 worth of gleam. The caption under Sophie's smiling face read, "To the best father-in-law, a gift that matches your class." My stomach turned to ice. 2 months ago, Sophie had called me sobbing, her voice shaking as she said she needed $10,000 for urgent medical expenses. I didn't hesitate. I didn't question her. I wired the money within the hour, because she's my daughter. That's what fathers do. And now? Here was the truth, broadcast for the world to see, my urgent money wrapped around James Mitchell's smug wrist while I sat alone in my modest Lake Washington home, holding $15 socks. The phone rang, Sophie. I let it go to voicemail. It rang again and again. 17 times that day. I finally listened to one. Her voice was frantic, breaking apart. "Dad, please, don't do this." But the damage was done. Something inside me broke, not loudly, not with shouting or tears, but with the cold, unmistakable click of a lock sliding shut. I didn't know exactly where this new path would lead, only that there would be no turning back. And for the first time in years, that thought didn't terrify me. It lit a fire in me I hadn't felt in decades. If this story touched your heart, press 1" the comments. If you think it could have been handled differently, press 2. And I'd love to know, where in the world are you listening from? Seattle has a strange way of feeling alive and hollow all at once. Out here on the eastern edge, near Lake Washington, the mornings start with gulls cutting across the gray sky and the faint slap of water against the pier, steady, familiar. My house isn't big, but it's mined cedar siding aged by decades of rain, west-facing windows that catch the last light before it slips behind the skyline. Grace used to keep pots of lavender by the porch. After she died, I kept them going, though now they bloom unevenly, like they know something's missing. I've been here nearly 30 years. Grace and I built this place nail by nail, room by room, saving what little we could while raising Sophie, our only child. She was just 7 when cancer took her mother. After that, it was only the two of us, and I swore I'd make sure she never felt the world was empty. I gave up the fishing trips I'd planned, the sailboat I'd been saving for, even my retirement cushion. Every dollar funneled into her future. Her college tuition alone could have bought that boat twice over, but I never hesitated. Sophie was my pride-sharp mind. Bright smile, auburn hair like Grace's. When she married Ryan Mitchell, I thought she'd found someone who could stand beside her, not above her. Ryan's family was wealthy. His father, James Mitchell, strutted through life as a real estate mogul with enough tailored suits to clothe a small army. I didn't belong in their world, but I told myself it didn't matter. Over the years, Sophie's visits dwindled. Calls became texts. Texts became rare. And when she did come, it was usually with Ryan in tow. He had a way of standing in my doorway, all expensive cologne and casual contempt, tossing comments like, "You're a simple guy, David. Must be nice not having to think about real money." I swallowed my pride and kept my home, as Grace would have liked oak floors gleaming with lemon polish, framed photos in their perfect row, Sophie's gap-toothed grin, her graduation, her wedding day. My life's work hung there, unblinking. Father's Day used to be simple, but warm pancakes in the morning, a walk along the lake, maybe a movie if the rain set in. Grace would bake a pie, uneven crust and all. Sophie, when she was small, would hand me cards smudged with markers and crayon hearts, her blocky letters shouting, "Best dad ever." Those things meant more than she could have known. This year, she texted earlier in the week, "Got a surprise for you Sunday. Can't stay long, though dinner plans with Dad." She didn't need to say it. Dad wasn't me. It was James Mitchell. I told myself not to care. I lied. When she arrived that afternoon, the rain smell still clung to the air. She was dressed like she'd stepped out of a magazine's sleek bun, designer coat buttoned just so, nails polished in a shade that probably had a name you'd find in a luxury catalog. Ryan followed her in, loafers polished to a mirror shine, wearing that thin, superior smile. They declined coffee. Sophie handed me a small gift bag, tissue paper crumpled carelessly inside. I thought maybe the real gift would come later, tickets to a concert. A book she knew I'd been waiting for, something personal, something with meaning. I was wrong. I reached into the bag, my fingers brushing against the coarse, half-crumpled tissue paper, and pulled out a pair of navy socks. Not gift-boxed, not wrapped, just tossed in. They were the kind you grab from a clearance bin without thinking twice. The price tag still clung stubbornly to the seam. $15. $15. I held them up, forcing a smile that felt like it might split my face. Practical, I said, my voice deliberately even. Always dreamed of these. Sophie let out a laugh too high, too quick, brittle as glass. Exactly. Something useful, right? You don't need anything fancy. She adjusted the silk scarf around her neck, movements slow, deliberate, as if showing me what fancy really looked like. Ryan leaned lazily against the doorway, hands buried in his pockets. You're a simple guy, David. No need for extravagance. He said it with that same infuriating half-smile, a joke wrapped in a jab. My skin prickled. I folded the socks with careful precision, setting them back into the bag. Appreciate it, I replied, keeping my tone steady while my hands trembled beneath the table, not from cold but from something darker. Staying for coffee? I asked, already knowing the answer. Sophie shook her head. We've got plans. Dinner with Dad. She didn't mean me. She didn't have to say it. Her eyes flicked toward Ryan, and they exchanged a glance, something quick, smug, and unspoken. They left within minutes. The moment the door shut, the house felt emptier than before they'd arrived, like they'd carried the air and warmth out with them. I set the socks on the kitchen counter. The price tag dangled like an insult. As I reached for a mug, the faint scent of lemon polish still clung to the room, but now it seemed swallowed by something heavier. And then, like a rock dropping through my chest, the memory came. Sophie's voice 2 months earlier, quivering through the phone. Dad, I hate to ask this, but it's urgent. Medical stuff. I need $10,000. Please. I'd wired it that same day. No questions. No hesitation. The mug slipped from my hand and shattered on the tile. I stared at the jagged shards scattered across the floor, my breath coming fast, shallow. I swept the pieces into the trash, the scrape of the broom sounding too loud in the silence. Something useful, she'd said. The words echoed in my head, each one heavier than the last. I took my coffee to the couch and opened my laptop, not to check email, but to distract myself. That's when I saw it. A photo, just an hour old. James Mitchell, grinning at a white linen table in some high-end downtown restaurant, and on his wrist a gleaming Rolex Daytona, $10,000 of betrayal. The caption from Sophie, to the best father-in-law, a gift that matches your class. My blood iced over. I clicked the image, zooming in until the watch face filled my screen. I knew that shine. It wasn't a knockoff. This was real. 2 months ago. It's for medical bills, Dad. Vital stuff. I wouldn't ask if it wasn't serious. My hands shook as I closed the laptop. The socks still sat on the counter, their dangling price tag mocking me. The phone rang. Sophie. I didn't answer. It rang again, and again. 17 times that day. A voicemail slipped through between the calls, her voice cracking. Dad, please don't do this. The afternoon light dimmed as clouds rolled over the lake. I sat in the half-dark, the old clock on the mantel ticking like a hammer inside my skull. Outside, the street looked perfect, trimmed lawns, rain-slicked driveways, a postcard calm. Inside, something had hardened. I pulled my jacket from the hook by the door. I didn't yet know the full shape of what I would do, but I knew one thing with unshakable clarity: this was the last time I'd be anyone's fool. The image of that Rolex seared itself into my mind, and with each tick of the clock, I felt myself becoming someone new. Someone who wasn't going to let lies stand. Someone Sophie didn't want to meet. The next morning, Seattle's sky sagged under its own weight low, bruised clouds pressing down, drizzle racing crooked lines down the glass. I sat at the kitchen table, the legal pad in front of me untouched, the socks Sophie had given me shoved deep into a drawer like something rotten. That Rolex kept flashing in my head. The way it caught the light, the smug tilt of James's smile as if he owned not just the watch, but the moment, the room, the people in it. I knew I couldn't just sit here letting the anger chew at me. I needed proof. I printed Sophie's photo, the ink still tacky under my fingers, folded it carefully, and slid it into my jacket pocket. Then I drove toward downtown, the tires hissing on rain-slick streets. Madison Avenue Jewelers stood like a cathedral to excess polished brass gleaming, diamonds lounging in the window as if they could buy and sell the whole block. Inside, the air was warm, perfumed faintly with roses. Spotlights hit glass cases, making each watch a star on its own stage. A young woman in a fitted black blazer approached, her smile tight, assessing me in one sweep-worn jacket, damp hair, no Rolex in sight. "Good morning," she said, professional warmth on autopilot. "Looking for something special?" I pulled the folded printout from my pocket, flattening it on the counter. "This watch," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Was it purchased here?" Her smile faltered. She glanced toward the back, where a balding man in a tailored gray suit stood like a guard. He stepped forward, hand extended. "Mark Hastings, store manager, may I?" I handed over the photo. His eyes narrowed, recognition flickering. "Yes," he said after a beat. "Rolex Daytona, stainless steel. Purchased here in March. Paid in full." The words hit like a shove to the chest. "Do you remember who bought it?" He hesitated just long enough for the answer to sting. "Young woman, auburn hair, accompanied by a man, said it was for a family member. Payment on a card in the name of Carter." His gaze shifted from the photo to my face. I opened my wallet and laid my driver's license on the glass. That would be me. A crack formed in his polished demeanor, a flicker of sympathy. "I'm sorry, sir. We don't get involved in personal matters, but I can confirm the transaction matches the watch in your photo." I thanked him, slid the photo back into my pocket, and stepped out into the rain. It was heavier now, soaking through my jacket, but I barely felt it. Halfway to my car, a voice called out over the hiss of tires and rain. "David? That you?" Tom Reynolds, my neighbor from across the street, jogging with his spaniel. He slowed, pulling the leash tight. "Didn't expect to see you downtown," he said, pushing rain from his brow. "Funny saw your girl here a couple months ago. Same store. Looked like she was picking out something big." My throat tightened. "Yeah," I said, forcing a smile that felt brittle. "Guess she's got expensive taste." Tom laughed, oblivious. "That she does." He jogged on, leaving me in the downpour, his casual words sinking in like stones. I slid into my car, water dripping onto the seat, and stared at the folded printout on the passenger side. There it was, cold, undeniable. Sophie had lied. And now I had the proof in black and white. By the time I pulled into the driveway, the drizzle had thickened into a cold, steady rain. I didn't bother with my jacket, just went straight to the kitchen, the printout from Madison Avenue Jewelers still in my pocket. I set it on the counter. It sat there like a loaded weapon, waiting to be used. I scrolled to Natalie Brooks's number. We'd met years ago, after Grace passed, when she handled the estate paperwork. Sharp mind, no nonsense. The kind of woman who could cut through a lie like a hot knife through rope. She picked up on the second ring. "David Carter, been a while, what's going on?" "I need your help," I said. "It's about Sophie." An hour later, I was sitting in her office on the 21st floor of the Columbia Center, the city outside blurred by sheets of rain. I told her everything. Father's Day, the socks, the Rolex, the $10,000 for medical expenses, and the jeweler's confirmation. Natalie tapped her pen against a yellow legal pad, her eyes locked on mine. "First step, freeze any access she has to your accounts. That stops the bleeding. Then we dig every transaction tied to her, every dollar she's touched. If we take this legal, we'll have the trail." "She's my daughter," I said quietly, like the words might change the facts. "She's also using you," Natalie replied, firm but measured. "You can love her and still protect yourself. Sometimes those are the same thing." I nodded. She slid a form across the desk. "Sign here. Removes her as an authorized user. Effective now." The pen felt heavier than it should, but my hand was steady as I signed. Natalie gathered the papers and stood. "Let's go to the bank. No reason to give her another day to burn through your money." At the branch, the manager, a thin man with rimless glasses, reviewed the documents. Once I process this, Miss Mitchell will be notified her cards are inactive. That's fine, I said. Calm voice. Heart pounding. 10 minutes later, I stepped back onto the rain-slick sidewalk. My phone buzzed. Sophie? I didn't answer. A voicemail followed instantly. Dad, my card just got declined. What the hell did you do? I listened without replying. 5 minutes later, she called again. This time I picked up. I took back what's mine, I said. Her voice spiked. You're being selfish. I needed that money. You needed it for medical bills, remember? That was a lie. There was a beat of silence before a sharp inhale. Ryan won't let this slide, she snapped, and hung up. I stood there in the rain, water soaking through my shirt, and realized her threat didn't land. Not even close. Back at Natalie's office, I handed her my phone to play the voicemail. She smiled faintly. She's rattled. Good. That means she's off balance. Now's the time to push. What's next? I asked. Now we prepare for the fact she's going to swing back. People like this rarely retreat. You've cut off her easy money. She'll get desperate, and desperation makes mistakes easier to catch. As I left, I had the sinking certainty that Sophie's next move was already in motion, and I wasn't about to be caught off guard. 2 days later, Natalie's name lit up my phone just after breakfast. Morning, I answered. Her tone was tight, no small talk. She filed a complaint. We need to be at the precinct by 11. Him. I set my coffee down hard enough to slosh it over the rim. A complaint? Financial abuse, Natalie said. She's claiming you cut off family funds and caused her hardship. It's the standard move when someone's been cut off cold. She doesn't realize what kind of paper trail we've built. Seattle's central precinct smelled like burnt coffee and wet fabric. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead as we sat across from Officer Grant Walker, a broad-shouldered man with eyes that gave away nothing. He opened a thin manila folder and began reading in a voice that was more procedural than personal. Mr. Carter, your daughter and son-in-law state you restricted access to accounts they rely on for living expenses. They claim this has caused considerable hardship. He looked up at me like he couldn't decide whether I was a petty tyrant or just the latest family drama to hit his desk. I leaned forward, voice calm but edged. Officer, it's my money. They took $10,000 and bought a Rolex for her father-in-law. I stopped them from doing it again. One eyebrow rose, but he didn't interrupt. Natalie reached into her bag and slid a thick folder across the desk. Bank statements, purchase receipt, written confirmation from Madison Avenue Jewelers. All show the funds were taken without consent and spent on personal luxury items. That's fraud. Officer, not a domestic dispute. Oh? Walker flipped through the papers, his frown settling deeper. So this wasn't for medical expenses? Not unless a Rolex Daytona cures the flu, Natalie said without missing a beat. For the first time, the officer's posture changed. He closed the folder slowly. All right. I'll document your side. This will be reviewed, but it's clear there's more here than they're admitting. Outside, the rain had thinned to a fine mist. Natalie kept pace beside me toward her car. She's rattled, she said. Filing a complaint this week means she's out of moves. That's good for us. Good? I asked, still tasting the bitterness in my mouth. It's leverage, she said, glancing at me. Panic makes people sloppy. She'll show her hand, and when she does, we'll use it. By the time I pulled into my driveway, the tension in my chest had hardened into something colder. Resolve. I'd spent 2 decades letting guilt, love, and hope blind me to the truth of what Sophie had become. That fog was gone. That night, Natalie called again. One more thing. You should consider rewriting your will. If you're serious about cutting this cord, make it airtight. No loopholes. No dangling carrots for her to chase. The idea hit harder than I wanted to admit. Rewriting my will wasn't just about money. It meant closing the chapter I'd been clinging to since Grace died. I took a long breath. Set it up. The notary's office smelled faintly of paper and polished wood, a quiet refuge from the constant hum of downtown Seattle. I sat at a heavy oak table, a fresh will spread in front of me. Natalie stood at my shoulder, her eyes scanning each clause like a hawk. This document, the notary said, adjusting her glasses, removes Sophie Carter Mitchell as a direct beneficiary. Your estate will be placed in a trust with Miss Brooks as executor. Is that correct? That's correct, I said. The words tasted metallic cold, final but also clean. I signed, each stroke of the pen carving a line between the man I had been and the man I was choosing to become. Natalie's faint smile carried no gloating, just approval. "Step 1, she said. "Step 2 is walking out of here without looking back." We stepped into rare Seattle sunshine, and for a brief moment I thought that might be the end. Cut the ties, move forward. But life doesn't loosen its grip that easily. That evening, my phone rang from a number I didn't know. "This is James Mitchell," a deep, controlled voice said. "We need to talk. My study. Tomorrow, 9 a.m. The next morning, I arrived at his waterfront mansion, marble floors under my feet, a chandelier dripping crystals above. James sat behind a desk the size of a small car, his gaze fixed on me. In front of him sat a small velvet box. He slid it forward. "She told me this watch was from her savings. A gift for my support. I found out yesterday it was your money. I didn't touch it. She lied to both of us." His jaw hardened. "She's been circling my business, pushing for investments, trying to get leverage. I thought it was ambition. Now I see it's greed." Natalie slid the jeweler's receipt across the desk. "We have proof. This isn't a misunderstanding, it's calculated misuse of funds." James snapped the box shut. "Take it," he said flatly. "I'll handle my end." The Rolex was heavier than I expected, more than just steel. It was years of trust, now solid proof of betrayal. We left with the watch in my pocket and a clarity I hadn't felt in years. The next morning, a knock at my door. Sophie stood there, hair loose, eyes swollen. Ryan lingered behind her, staring at the porch. "Dad, please," she said, her voice cracking. "We messed up. The watch, the money, it was a mistake. We've lost everything. James cut us off." "Oh." I stayed in the doorway, arms folded. "It wasn't a mistake. It was a choice. You lied, filed a false complaint against me, and tried to take more. That's not an accident, Sophie. That's who you are now." Her eyes filled. "We just need help until we get back on our feet." "No," I said, the word solid and final. "You made your choices. Live with them." Ryan shifted, his voice low. "We'll do anything, David, just—" There's nothing left to say. I stepped back inside and closed the door. Her muffled sobs stayed on the porch, fading as I moved into the quiet living room. The old clock on the mantel still sat stopped at the same time it had for years. This time, the silence didn't feel like loss. It felt like freedom. 2 days later, I walked into a narrow jewelry shop near Pike Place Market and laid the Rolex on the counter. The jeweler turned it over in his hands, appraising each gleam of steel before sliding a check across to me, $9,800 after fees. I didn't hesitate. From there, I drove straight to Rainier Children's Shelter, a modest brick building with scuffed steps and a faded welcome mat. Inside, walls painted in mismatched bright colors tried to hold back the weight of the world. The director, a woman with warm eyes and work-worn hands, looked stunned when I handed her the check. "This will change lives," she said softly. "I hope so," I replied. "Better here than gathering dust in a drawer." "Oh." When I stepped back into the street, the air smelled of salt from the sound, the breeze cool against my face. That watch had been nothing but a symbol of betrayal. Now it was a bridge I had chosen to build on my own terms. That afternoon I met Natalie at Green Lake Park. The clouds broke just enough for sunlight to spill across the rippling water. We walked along the gravel path, the crunch underfoot steady, grounding. "You could have bought yourself something nice," she said with a faint smile. "I bought myself peace," I answered. She nodded. "Fair trade." We found a bench by the shore. A few kids were chasing each other near the playground, their laughter drifting over the water. I picked up a flat stone, flicked it from my fingers, and watched it skip across the lake until it sank. Ripples spread in widening rings before fading into stillness. Grace used to tell me that sometimes love is holding on, and sometimes it's letting go. For decades, I'd only practiced the first part. Today, I understood the second. As I sat beside Natalie, I realized I didn't need Sophie's approval or her version of love to feel whole. I'd given her every chance. I'd given her everything. Now, I was giving myself the same. Message. Sometimes the hardest act of love isn't forgiveness, it's deciding to stop letting someone hurt you. Boundaries aren't walls. They're doors you close so you can walk through another towards something better.